regulations of the BELA Act that were gazetted this week. The controversial Basic Education Laws Amendment Act was enacted in December of last year. It aims to make schooling more accessible to all learners. Now, 2 of the 8 regulations have now been published. Parliament's chairperson of the Basic Education Portfolio Committee has expressed deep dissatisfaction with the regulations and the process of gazetting them. Right, let's expand the conversation. To talk more about this, we're joined by Dr. Jessica Ronaasen from Real Reform for ECD. Dr. Ronaasen, a very good evening to you. Thank you for your time. The BELA Act has been controversial from the onset. What are some of your main concerns with the 2 gazetted regulations on admissions and the grade R rollout?
Yes, good evening to your listeners. It's so exciting to be here to have this discussion because, one, when new legislation is made, it is the responsibility of the legislative process to engage civil society, and these conversations, including media conversations, are part of that. And so it's great to be here today. One of the concerns is that, yes, we want universal access. We want quality access to education for young children. That is not to be disputed. I think where we are starting to see the issues crop up is in the detail. And we could hear that in the introduction today. There are small inclusions within these policies that are not being thought out or discussed practically, such as the admissions issue around feeder zones, for example. And that's a very practical issue that has been largely managed locally. And so by centralizing these decisions, civil society and the commentary is saying, these decisions are being taken away from the local areas, and by centralizing this decision, we're going to have issues in governance. And that is concerning. And so not giving a participatory process is an issue.
So you talk about the importance of having engaged civil society. Why do you think civil society has had to fight so hard to be heard in this process? I mean, has there been meaningful engagement?
I think to some degree there is, and this is once again, as an active member of the Real Reform for ECD, is one of the opportunities that we have seen that has begun is an active process of engagement. But how often is that a tick box exercise? And so I think where we are needing to call and raise and amplify these voices and these discussions is in the opportunity to say, as part of this process, if civil society has not been adequately engaged or the commentary is not being heard, such in this detail, then these bills need to be made known before they become implementation plans. And I think that's what we're seeing here. We need phased approaches. We need thoughtful implementation plans, and of course to be well researched. And while we welcome the national budget increase in this financial year, we acknowledge that this is a sector that has been under-resourced historically, and that this is not an overnight quick fix. Admissions, rollout plans are not going to be solved overnight. And that's what we're seeing. And when they say these policies are being put together piece by piece, we have to see the policy as a whole. And I think that's also part of this conversation, is that it is structural and systemic. And we need to look at the teachers, the support services, and the infrastructure when we think about any adjustments to legislation.
Which actually brings me to my next question. Pardon the interruption. From your perspective, just looking at the entire process, is the country ready in terms of infrastructure, in terms of teacher capacity and the curriculum?
You hit the nail on the head there. I do not believe that we are ready. I think this is part of the developmental process. South Africa has a long history of inequality, and that's again what's being raised here, is that admissions policies that are not inclusive, that are not talking to every language, race, culture, community. Every child from urban to rural South Africa should have equal access to gain entry into a classroom, and not an overcrowded classroom, a safe classroom that allows that child to thrive. Are we ready? I don't believe we are. I think that is why the development sector is working tirelessly, and this is an opportunity to partner with government, and that's what this discussion is about, to say participation should be happening at legislative level before we see the issues hitting the ground, such as children being excluded from classrooms because they may not fit into a feeder zone or don't fit into a demographic profile, which would be terrible to see.
So in that event, if we're not ready, what does that mean then for one of the biggest challenges in reading for meaning in early childhood education, which needs urgent attention?
Sure. I think we need to turn our focus in many ways to the early years, to see that from birth, from conception, birth, right up until age 3 are critical periods before that child even enters a schooling system, and to really acknowledge that, yes, while we need to focus on the education system, the healthcare system and the infants of South Africa are learning too, and that there are critical milestones that they could achieve before we get into the reading kind of expectations, because early literacy is happening right from the moment that child is first crying out for its mother and engaging in that serve and return experience. And that's early communication. So I think the conversation is around, how do we care better for families? How do we care better for mothers and those children that are in their care responsively through stimulating environments? And that doesn't need to look like an ECD program. That could be a day mother. It could be a living room or a tree. And underneath a tree, you can learn just as well as you can in a resourced class. And so let's really shift our focus, I suppose, from expecting this kind of learning to happen only in a formal school setting and start to empower parents, again, to the civil society movement. There are loads of organizations that are doing incredible work. And the government can continue to support, as well as the Department of Health and Department of Social Development. This is not an isolated issue, but an integrated one.
Some sound advice there. Thank you so much for speaking to us this evening, Dr. Jessica Ronaasen from Real Reform for ECD.